with matters of the U.S. elections because despite President Donald Trump multiple lawsuits in hope of stopping vote counting in three crucial battleground states, his opponent Joe Biden said he is confident of winning the presidency as he insisted every last vote be counted. The Democrat presidential candidate was speaking to his supporters in Delaware Wednesday afternoon. Well, let's have more details of that in this report by Julton Jai-Suare.
I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election.
The former vice president flipped the crucial battleground states of Michigan and Wisconsin on Wednesday, giving him 264 electoral college votes to Trump's 214. Joe Biden said it is clear he is winning enough states to reach the threshold of 270 electoral votes necessary to secure the White House.
I'm not here to declare that we've won, but I am here to report when the count is finished, we believe we will be the winners.
He said despite the global pandemic, Americans voted more than ever before in their country's history. The 77-year-old politician said he and Senator Harris are on track to win more votes in any ticket in the history of America, and that they are very proud of their campaign. Biden also used the moment to call for unity following the bitter campaign. He urged Americans to work harder to listen to each other and leave the divisive election behind them.
So once this election is finalized and behind us, it'll be time for us to do what we've always done as Americans, to put the harsh rhetoric of the campaign behind us, to lower the temperature, to see each other again, to listen to one another, to hear each other again, and respect and care for one another, to unite, to heal, to come together as a nation. I know this won't be easy. I'm not naive, neither of us are. I know how deep and hard the opposing views are in our country on so many things. But I also know this as well. To make progress, we have to stop treating our opponents as enemies. We are not enemies.
He said although he campaigned under the Democrat ticket, he will govern as an American president. Biden added that he will work as hard for those who didn't vote for him as he will for those who voted for him. While Biden voices optimism, Trump spent the day sowing confusion. In a series of tweets, Donald Trump claimed that the election was rigged against him and declared himself victorious in 4 battleground states that are yet to announce their final results. However, Twitter warned that the claims might be misleading about an election or other civic process.
We won the great state of Ohio. We won Texas.
For iAfrica News, I am Julton Jai-Suare.
Democratic candidate Joe Biden confident of victory on the U.S. elections. Now joining me on the line from Washington, D.C. to discuss more on this is Dr. Johanna LeBlanc, National Security and Foreign Affairs Legal Analyst. Well, thank you very much, Doctor, for joining me on the line. Now, what is the mood like where you are as counting is still underway in major battlegrounds?
First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on. The reality is that both candidates were forced to campaign under extenuating circumstances. And as we know, there has never been in the history of this country where candidates campaigned during a global health crisis, a crisis that required social distancing. It required for the campaigns to take measures that historically they had never taken before. And it also required a different level of strategy. And the reality is that there is no playbook on how to conduct an election in the midst of a global health crisis. So I think that we should give all those who have been involved in this election process their due respect for having engaged in such under this kind of circumstance. But as it pertains to your question, the reality is that it appears to be Joe Biden is the leading candidate. He currently has 264 electoral votes. And as we know, in the United States of America, a candidate does not win the presidency solely by popular votes. So Joe Biden essentially needs 6 more electoral votes in order to be announced the president of these United States. But what we're seeing is that the incumbent President Donald Trump is contesting the election results in many of the states, indicating that there
I was going to ask about that, Doctor. Now, how has Trump's claims of victory, affected the atmosphere of an election that is too close to call?
Well, the reality is that most of us who have been following the election very closely, we saw that the current administration has done a really good job at discrediting the electoral system that we have here in America, indicating that there will be fraud ultimately, because the reality is that because of the COVID-19 pandemic, you have an enormous number of Americans who voted by mail. They mailed in their ballots. And President Trump is saying that perhaps there will be voter fraud. But the reality is that in America, voter fraud is not really the issue. How America suppressed voters here is through voter suppression by gerrymandering, by some of the laws that they have in place that make it more difficult for certain groups of the population to vote. But the idea that someone will go to the polls and steal the election, it is not something that the American public is quite used to.
Yes, yes, I was going to ask again, you talked about the stealing of election, and of course, Trump has already launched lawsuits to stop the counting of votes, and suggesting he's been cheated, with mail-in ballots. What will happen if the final election results are disputed?
Well, this is what's happening. You have a number of people, again, millions of Americans who mailed in their ballots. The question for Trump is, when were those ballots mailed in? Were they mailed in on November the 3rd, November the 4th? So he's questioning that because he doesn't know, right? And also, there's another question around the legitimacy of some of these ballots, because if the signature does not match the signature that is on file, perhaps that vote could be thrown out. But what we saw the Trump administration did is that under his administration, whether Trump is reelected or not, he has certainly changed the course of America's jurisprudence. We saw recently he appointed a conservative Supreme Court justice. So he has leaned the Supreme Court to the far right. So if litigation were to be brought in front of the Supreme Court, many of the experts were saying that he could potentially win.
Okay, just finally now, of course, for how long can Americans wait to know who will be their president for the next 4 years?
Well, let me tell you, the reality is that legally, it's the states that certify the votes, and they have to wait until all votes are counted. But I think that Americans have gotten very spoiled in terms of knowing who is the elected official on the night of the election. But that's not how it's supposed to be done by law. And also, when it comes to the electoral vote, those individuals would not cast their votes legally until December the 14th. But because of the various litigation that we do see in various states and the president contesting some of these results, it may take a few days. But the reality is that Joe Biden is leading in the polls.
All right, Dr. Johanna, thank you very much for your time. It was good to have you on the line.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. And that was Dr. Joanna, live from Washington, D.C., talking to us on the latest developments on the American elections as the world awaits who will be, of course, the next president for the United States for the next 4 years.